I try not to get too bogged down on the science because I'm not an authority on it, but I would describe myself as an agnostic on the science. I think there is still a lot of uncertainty, although I readily concede there has been some warming of the planet over the last 20 or so years. But interestingly, the IPCC models, there is a great deal of uncertainty because the rate of the warming has not increased to the extent that the IPCC model suggested it would in the 1990s. There has been some tapering off. Now, to the extent that that's true, that does lead one to believe that there is more uncertainty. But on the issue of one-sided media campaigns, look, I think the Australian media have actually done themselves a disservice. Day in and day out in this country, we have front page news stories broadcast on the ABC about the carbon debate. And yet, with the exception of about 2, maybe 3 columnists, the news of the Canadian election has hardly been mentioned. And this was a significant result. This was a Canadian Conservative Prime Minister gaining seats on the back of opposing a carbon tax or an ETS. Now, this was significant news for Australia because Canada and Australia have very similar types of economies. They're very resource-rich, and this hardly got picked up at all in the mainstream press. Now, that was a classic case of how your argument goes both ways, and I would argue that in this country, especially during the time of 07 and 08 and 09, it was conducted in a heretic-hunting and anti-intellectual environment where sceptics were hardly heard. And indeed, it was not only impermissible to question the science a lot of the time, it was impermissible to question the response. So I think this debate can go both ways.
Yeah.
Well, may I respond to that?
Of course.
I can't understand really what you mean when you say I'm an agnostic. I mean, to me, to say that you're agnostic excuse me. I listened to what you said. Please let me speak.
Yeah, sure.
To say you're agnostic about the science, to me, only makes sense if you, in fact, have not been paying attention or don't understand the science, because the scientific evidence is now overwhelming, and anyone who's paid attention to it, anyone who understands it, anyone who understands the physics and chemistry of the atmosphere knows that scientists predicted climate change from increased greenhouse gases and deforestation going back to the 1950s. They have built models. Of course, models are representations of the natural world. They are not the world itself. So, of course, there will always be uncertainties about the details, but the overall picture is overwhelmingly clear, and it's exactly what scientists have predicted. And if you talk about the IPCC forecast, my graduate students and I have studied this. We've looked at what the scientists have predicted on this issue over the past 50 years, and we find that in most cases, scientists have actually underestimated the change. We see sea level rising faster than predicted. We see overall global temperatures rising faster than predicted. We see sea surface temperatures in the Caribbean rising faster than predicted. So if anything, scientists have been conservative on this issue, and now we are seeing the changes all around us.